Hey everybody, surprise! I was able to actually get through a huge amount of stuff this week. I did realize that it would not take me as long to do this stuff after rebuilding the website, so that's a nice thing about it, or rebuilding this whole thing. So let's get down to business, shall we? So you'll notice we have champions now because, hey, it was WrestleMania, the pay-per-view this week for this brand, and as you can see, here's the card for you. Axe and Smash defeating Million. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but Ultimate Warrior defeating Hulk Hogan to win the WWF Championship in the main event took place. The rest of the card, the rest of the show this whole week, you had first WCW Saturday Night. The main event, of course, Sting defeats Ric Flair. Starrcade will be their pay-per-view starting next week, so look forward to that card as well. Of course, there will be 7 matches on that card. There was no Champions Crown. I'm going to try to keep the Champions Crown only during pay-per-views for the most part. I thought I got rid of that little Raw thing there. But Goldberg defeating Moose. Drew McIntyre defeats the Boogeyman. The Bloodline defeats Austin Theory, Edge, and Randy Orton. And John Cena defeats The Rock in the main event. Huge main event there. SmackDown Champions. The main event, JBL announced his arrival is coming soon. He will be coming to this brand. Stone Cold would defeat Triple H in the main event here. Test and Billy Gunn would lose to Eddie Guerrero and Batista. And then Collision took place this week. No titles again. I'm going to keep those limited to only the pay-per-views. Best Friends defeating the Dark Order. Lance Archer and Malachi Black. Brian Cage defeating Will Yuta, Hook, and Danhausen. Death Triangle defeating Private Party and Matt Hardy in some trios action. And Bryan Danielson defeating CM Punk, Samoa Joe, Jon Moxley, Brody Lee, and Adam Cole. We're on to Dynamite now. We got Butcher and the Blade defeating Jurassic Express. Sammy Guevara and Santana and Ortiz defeat FTR and Ricky Starks. The Young Bucks and SCU come to a time limit draw. They both drew during their match. And then Hangman Adam Page defeating Wardlow, Kenny Omega, Christian Cage, MJF, and Chris Jericho. And I know the card kind of copied over because I realized there's just so many people with so limited amount of matches. So starting next week, we have Rampage, and we'll see which superstars debut on that show. That goes next week. AEW Rampage will be kicking into gear. Then over to NXT, no Champions Crown, but we do have Damian Priest and Dominic Mysterio defeating Wesley and Nash Carter. Cameron Grimes defeats Kushida and Ali in a triple threat match, almost defeating Carmelo Hayes, Bronson Reed, and Eli Dragunov in a fatal 4-way. And then the main event, Solo Sikoa defeats Ricochet, Kofi Kingston, and Braun Breaker also in a fatal 4-way. Over to new WCW champions, and we had the Street Profits defeat DIY. The Hurricane defeats X-Pac, and Sheamus defeats Bobby Lashley. The main event saw Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens defeat the Steiner Brothers. Over to CWA now, and we had Zodiac and the Goon end in a draw. Samu and Greg Valentine in a time limit draw in Heat. And in the main event, Vader defeated Harley Race. The WWF champions, this is going to be basically the Attitude version. And they'll be starting up here. Actually, they start this week with Farouk defeating Road Dogg Jesse James. And Bam Bam Bigelow defeats Rikishi. In the main event, D'Lo Brown defeats Mankind here on Velocity, which will be their running show. Over on Red Impact, no champions crowned yet. But James Gibson would defeat Crash Holly. Tony Mamaluke and Nunzio defeated Mike Knox and Tony Nese. And in the main event, Jerry Lynn defeats Snitsky and Mr. Kennedy. Over to Blue Impact now. And again, no champions crowned. But Sean O'Hare defeats Scotty Riggs. The Sandman wallops Delirious. And in the main event, Bill DeMott defeats Charlie Haas in his debut. The IWGP champions, again, nothing crowned yet. Dick Murdoch would defeat Matt Stryker. Mike Awesome and Zack Sabre Jr. defeat Lance Storm and Joey Mercury. The main event saw Chris Masters defeat Sonata. Over to AAA now, and again a small card, but Rene Dupree defeats Noam Dar. Kevin Thorne defeats Chris Bay. And in the main event, Roosh defeats Mark Jindrak. These shows will start next week. Again, we're going to be debuting a new roster of about 12 superstars, so very small, probably 3 matches on the card. Look forward to seeing that. And we probably will crown the champion within the next couple of weeks as well. Over to ECW now. Rhino defeats Aiden English, the Dudleys defeat Fashion Police, and Finley defeats Ted DiBiase. The main event saw Kurt Angle defeat John Morrison. The WWE ECW champions, no crowning yet, but Keith Lee and Dean Malenko defeat Cedric Alexander and Angel Garza. The Ascension defeats Hideo Itami and Akira Tozawa in tag team action. Austin Aries defeats the Brian Kendrick. The main event saw Ezekiel Jackson defeats Big Cass. The new champions, New Extreme Wrestling. Match results were AOP defeating Crime Time, Jason Jordan defeating William Regal, Sanity defeats No Way Jose, Adam Rose, and Elias, and in the main event, Alberto Del Rio defeats Ryback and Umaga in a triple threat. Over to Excite now, and no champions have been crowned yet, but Viking Raiders defeat Justin Gabriel and Heath Slater, Undisputed Era defeats Los Matadores, Drake Maverick and Damian Sandow come to a time limit draw. It was a 5-minute match. And in the main event, Mark Henry defeats R-Truth. Over to Tri-Champions now, all 3 matches. And of course, we have the North Wrestling Federation, which was the Nasty Boys defeats the Big Boss Man Billy Graham, IRS defeats Kamala, and Yokozuna defeats Big John Studd. Akeem and Jimmy Snuka defeat the Bushwhackers over at CWF, and Tito Santana and Gerald Briscoe come to a time draw, and Mabel defeats Tatanka. And over in SWF, Dynamite Kid defeats Pat Patterson, the Wild Samoans defeats Junkyard Dog and Crush, and King Kong Bundy defeats Roddy Piper. Over to TNA now, and TNA only had 3 matches on the card. Shark Boy and Taz and D'Angelo Dinero defeat Jesse, Magnus, and Jay Lethal. And then a 8-man match of Ian Putski, Steven Richards, Hernandez, and Paul Burchill defeated Manic, Rob Conway, Lance Cade, and Desmond Wolfe. The main event saw Jeff Jarrett defeating James Storm. Over to NWA now, and Ernie Ladd defeats Tony Atlas. Abdullah the Butcher and Kevin Sullivan defeated the Killer Bees. Tank Abbott and the Mountie went on to a time limit draw, and Dr. Death Steve Williams defeats Jack Briscoe. Then the IWF saw some action tonight as Spike Dudley and Tajiri and Rico defeated the Spirit Squads of Mikey, Mitch, and Johnny. Simon System defeats Marcus Corvan, Muhammad Hassan, and Sylvester Kai after a lot of mistrust between the other 3. Super Crazy and Psychosis would defeat the Highlanders. In the main event, Tyson Tomko defeats Kenzo Suzuki. And we have a champion. Colt Cabana would defeat Mr. Hughes. Joey Janela defeats Chase Owens. New Jack, Brad Armstrong, Demon Dale Torborg, David Finley, and Homicide would defeat Brian Pillman Jr., Mikey Whipwreck, Matt Taven, Michael Elgin, and Sabio Vega in a huge 10-man tag. The main event was for the OROH World Championship. Jay Briscoe defeats Sami Callihan. Over to minor league action now, and there's nothing there, as they have not started yet. Actually, they have, excuse me. They're just combined over here into this roster because there's only 2 matches per card. So over here in the New Japan IWGP collaboration, you have Will Ospreay defeating Tomohiro Ishii, and in the main event, Kazuki Okada and Tetsuya Naito defeat Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows. Over to NXT Minor League, Juventud Guerrero would defeat Black Taurus, and in the main event, Ultimo Dragon defeats Vampiro. There was no show for GHC this week. Neither show is currently active as MLW does not have an active roster right now, and Legends of Wrestling is only on a part-time basis. There is no show. Wrestling Society X is currently not active yet. It will be eventually one day. And Universal Wrestling Association also not scheduled this week for any matches. But congratulations to new champions. Bob Backlund win the European title. Bret Hart win the WWF Intercontinental title. Razor Ramon Diesel would win the WWF Tag Team titles. And the Ultimate Warrior would win the WWF Heavyweight title. Over in the indie circuit, Jay Briscoe winning the OROH World title. And in your wrestling news, JBL again has announced that he'll be coming to SmackDown here in the coming month. Rampage and WWE and WWFA have been added to the brands. They will debut next time. So check back for the pay-per-view schedule and the show schedule as well as the rosters. And I'll see you next week.